We are thrilled to be joined at the top of the show by national reporter James Palmer out in Denver. James, how you doing?
I'm good, guys. It feels like home a little bit right now. I like this. This feels good.
This is a nice, it's a nice proxy for you. We will get to your Philly roots. Zach, how are you doing, by the way?
I'm doing great. I'm pumped.
I didn't want to let James stir in the waiting room before I brought him on.
I'm pumped. James is on, and I'm always happy when we speak to people from the area who have since moved elsewhere, but they keep the area code because you know it's a part of them. So I won't give James his number out on the show, but
it's like the first 7 digits.
But he maintains the area code, and as someone who moved and came back, I would not give up that phone number no matter where I went.
No, sticking 610 forever. Come on.
Love that. All right, so we got a lot to talk to you about, James, because you know a lot of the new players here very well. You also have deep connections to this team, so we want to get to all of that. I guess we should start with Vic Fangio. You were up close and personal with him as a head coach. What should Eagles fans expect? I guess schematically, personality-wise, how do you see this whole thing fitting?
Personality-wise, that's a good one, Bo. Yeah, Vic is, and he'll admit it, he's oozing with personality to showcase to everyone. I can't remember how many times we saw him on Hard Knocks with Miami. Was it like once? 0? That was by design. That
one of those ones where like the closed captioning would have just said like grumble. Like
I think it's right. I think it's right actually. He is not one to put himself out there, but I mean, in all honesty, what they're getting, I mean, this scheme and what he's developed is used through most of the NFL, like a good chunk of it in one capacity, and it's morphed into different ways. It's changed how offenses are played. What I think is kind of misunderstood with Vic a little bit is that it's going to be his way or the highway. There's no bending. There's no breaking. That's not really accurate. Like, it's not his opinion on what you run and what the Eagles will run defensively. It's really what you show him you can do and what you show him you can't do, and then he'll mold the defense to that, if that makes sense. If you're a linebacker that wants to blitz and he doesn't see you beat a running back picking you up repeatedly, you're just not going to blitz. If you continue to beat him, he'll blitz mercilessly. Yeah, he'll just keep coming, like if that's what you show him. So what players need to do is they need to show him what they can and can't do, and then the defense will be molded to that. I think the ability that it's Vic's way or the highway is a little bit misunderstood in a sense. Players care about 2 things, winning and making as much money as possible, right? I mean, that's pretty evident. I think it falls on the assistants a little bit with Vic, though, in terms of massaging this, going, if you do this, look at what Justin Simmons did at the safety position and the number of picks that he was able to go out and have because he played it the way Vic wanted it to be played and Vic played to his strengths. That's kind of on the assistants that work with Vic a little bit in massaging it, but Vic will do exactly and show you exactly what he wants, but you have to show him that you can do it, and then he'll move things around.
And so to build on that, you mentioned the assistants. Vic really got to pick his staff, which Sean Desai really didn't get the chance to do that per se. The coaches that Vic brought in, I know you know some of them. You've been around some of them. What's going to be the big differences with them under Vic?
That's what I think, Zach, the biggest thing is relaying that message, right? They know what Vic wants out there. Like I said, Vic isn't going to sit there and, like, the way it was described to me once by somebody on his staff back in the day was kind of like, well, how does Vic get that message across? How does he convince players to do that? And he was like, Vic doesn't worry about convincing anybody. Like, he doesn't worry about convincing anybody at all. Now, he's just going to, like I said, show you how it should be done. You show him what you can do. Now, it's up to the assistants, like, Christian Parker running the backside of that group, who knows Vic really, really well, and I think is one of the better teachers in this league from the buzz I hear about him around the league. That's somebody that Vic would lean on of like, hey, I've coached. You want to know how this is done right? Like, I've coached Pat Surtain. He uses these exact same techniques, and that's how it works. They kind of relay that message, Zach, for Vic, and I think that's why it's important that he was able to pick kind of his guys and have a say. That was a big part of Vic coming to Philadelphia. Obviously, it's coming home for him, and huge Phillies fan, rock on, they're rock solid. But it was a big deal for that to happen, so it can be done the way that it works at its highest level, if that makes sense for Vic and his group.
So as we think about Vic's like gruffness, right? And you heard the reports out of Miami last year that he did not get along well with some of those guys, especially in the secondary. That was maybe an awkward fit with Mike McDaniel. Nick Sirianni has never worked with a coach of like this gravitas as one of his coordinators. It has always been guys who were sort of on the come up like him, teachers by trade, right? What do you like? What do you expect from that fit between those two guys that, frankly, was probably a little bit Frankensteined in at like Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie's behest?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I don't know why I was thinking about this and thinking about Kansas City a little bit, Bo, while you were saying that. But it's like, I wonder if there'll be a little bit of an approach with Spags where it's like, just let him run inside. Like, kind of just let him do his thing. There's a track record with both guys in terms of what they've done. And I'm curious to see how much Nick wants to be like, maybe if we just let Vic be Vic on his side of the ball, like that might be what's best for us. And it might be, honestly. Now, I think sometimes when you have a guy that has, gravitas was a good word, or has, kind of the machismo that Vic kind of has on one side of the ball, like, I think you can hurt yourself by meddling sometimes. I think you might have to pick your spots because I think the track record is so deep that if he does do it the right way, it is going to have success. I do think that the unit talent-wise is above and beyond what it was a year ago, and now you, coaching-wise, are above and beyond what you were a year ago. I know that when a lot of these coaches were coming in, Nick was very honest with them about what happened on that side of the ball, about the blame that he took for some of the decisions that were made by him on that side of the ball, and that meant a lot to a lot of guys, including Vic, that were coming in on that side. So that gave me a little bit of a thought that maybe you let Vic go be Vic on that side until you have to see a reason or a time that you got to come in and step in.
It's funny to think about because, like, if Nick is not as involved in the offense, but he's not going to be doing stuff with Vic, like, what's he doing? But
he's the chief morale officer, right? But no, we've talked for the past 3 years, honestly, that the Eagles have chased this scheme, right? And now they get the originator. They don't get. Obviously, Sean Desai was the pupil. It seemed Jonathan Gannon was using elements of that scheme. But what types of players, whether it's on the Eagles roster or players that he's had in the past, particularly thrive in this scheme?
I think versatile players. I do, specifically on the back end. Like, I'm really curious to see what they do with Cooper DeJean because I think that type of player, now they don't really know where he's going to play. I know that there's a thought that he could even line up some at safety from some people in that building. They do think, and they're not alone in this, during the draft, it was like, how do you use him? Is he a Kyle Hamilton type of piece? Is he, a guy that plays inside? Because a lot of teams, and the Eagles weren't alone in this, thought that, and I'm going on a tangent in a second on Cooper, but I got to do this, is like, in terms of spatial awareness, vision, field vision, all of these things, he was kind of the best of the corner group. Is he the best corner? No. But in those traits, enough people around the league thought that he was maybe the top of the class in those traits. To me, those are valued in Vic's scheme. I really do. I know outside corners can play outside and lock and do things out there. But when you have the other pieces that can mix things up and move guys around, I think that is important for the way that Vic plays. I brought up Justin once, and I know probably everybody in Philly is curious about Justin Simmons, right?
We put out the tweet that you're coming on, and we're getting like, ask him about Justin Simmons. Ask him about Justin Simmons.
Yeah,
so we'll ask him about Justin Simmons.
It's a really, we can talk about it. He's a really perfect example. I mean, he's a guy that can play in the box. He's a guy that can play deep. Since he came into the league, nobody has more interceptions than him, not safeties, players. And that's a lot because of Vic and how Vic used him. And how he was able to be disguised and moved around. Like I said, if you can do a lot of things, Vic will have you do a lot of things. You just need to show him that. And I think that's why versatility, specifically on that back end, is extremely important. Because there also are players, and I know like Draymond Jones, who was with the Broncos? Yeah. And now Seattle. He got really frustrated playing in this scheme. It wasn't like, I can't attack. I can't go downfield as an interior pass rusher. That's not what he wants me to do. And he would get frustrated. Well, back to what I'm saying, I'm kind of curious too. Like, well, maybe he didn't think you could get downfield. Like maybe that's why he didn't have you go after the quarterback. I think Draymond has a little bit more talent to go after the quarterback than maybe he was used. It's my personal opinion, but I'm not gonna say I know more football than Vic, right? But like, I think that's kind of the two sides that you see. There are going to be players that get frustrated because they think they can do more than what they're being used for. but players that show him all these different ways they can be used, those will be showcased.
But that's an interesting thing to bookmark for Jalen Carter, I feel
exactly,
like,
right?
Yeah.
The whole point with Jalen Carter
is.
is to get to the quarterback. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. Now that's the thing. I do think, like the example I used in the beginning, Bo, like is if Jalen Carter is going to show that he's winning repeatedly on the inside, they're going to set it up on the defensive front to make sure that continues.
And Devin White actually talked about this last week, about how like he's heard that he's going to have to prove to Vic that he can be effective as a blitzer if he wants to blitz, and he hasn't had a chance to show that yet. And he's sort of getting in his ear like he wants to have a chance to show that. So at least
doesn't that sound
message
weird? But it sounds accurate, right? Like it sounds like that's what you should have to do as a player.
Right.
Like, man, I feel like I got to really show this. Well, yeah, you do.
Right. How about the Justin Simmons follow-up? What's going on there?
From my understanding, I don't see anything happening anytime soon. I think from what I've gathered, he knows his market. He knows the pay is not going to be what he has made in the past, and he's made plenty in the past. I think that's why you're seeing him be patient, because it's not going to change between now and the closer to camp at all, right? The market's not going to shift, and he's going to get some ridiculous payday. He knows that, so he knows he can be patient. He knows he can look around. He knows he can look for the best fit. There have been offers out there. Obviously, there have been teams that have tried to go after him, but I think he is kind of trying to pick that spot with, I don't want to speak for Justin, but like the dude's gone through a lot of losing and a lot of coaching changes. And I think that is playing a part in this about where he lands. And I know the lines of communication are still open with a lot of places that were interested the first time around. But I think he's being smart with it. And my thought and belief right now is nothing happens in the immediate future right now, because nothing's going to change in terms of the landscape of the market.
I'm always curious when I speak to someone like you who covers the whole league, that one thing is you'll be in Philly and then you might be in Denver the next day, and people in Denver will want to know, all right, what's going on in Philly, right? And it's kind of the cool thing about national reporters. So what's kind of the buzz on the Eagles organization right now elsewhere in the league? We're so locked in on what people in Philly think. What do people elsewhere think about the Eagles right now?
I don't know if people know this, the way the front office is thought about of Zach, because like there really are two schools of thought in the NFL, right? There's like the front office that's really scout driven, and it's film, and it's a scouting background, and that's what they do. And we need to see what's on tape, and that's the way we go. And then there's that analytic Harvard, Yale style that we're seeing around the league, where it's the numbers tell us this, and we're going to play the probabilities, and we're going to put it all in the machine that's going to fire out what we're looking at, and this is what we're going to do. The Eagles, in a lot of people around the league's opinion, is they're like the one team that does both, almost like 50-50. I would say the way Howie is thought of is most GMs are one of the two that I just described. I'm not saying Howie's looking at film like, some of these scouts look at it, but I would say he looks at a lot and he studies a lot, yet he still has the other side and the numbers side. And I think what makes them stand apart, and it's funny, I was talking to somebody in a front office in the NFC like a couple days ago, and he was like, I was trying to describe, because every front office is looking at every other front office, trying to steal and figure out how they do it. And he was like, I was describing to the guys in the room what Philly does, and it was like, they're not scared to make mistakes, and they have a plan if the mistake happens, how they're going to correct it. And there's so much fear, he said, in this league, right? Of like, well, if I pick the wrong guy, admitting that I picked the wrong guy to ownership is just like telling my boss I effed up. Like nobody in the NFL loves to say, you know what? Every GM is telling the owner that he's going to come around. He's going to come around. This is going to work. Like it's very refreshing in some people around the leagues, or maybe envious around the league, of how Howie and company will say, nah, this didn't work. Like, let's move on. And we're going to fix it by doing this. And I think that's what makes Philly a little bit different than some of these other places. And I think, to me, talking to people in front offices around the league, if you do it the same as everybody else, like you got a pretty damn good chance of just staying in the middle.
Yeah.
Like, Dallas, for instance, doesn't take a whole lot of chances, like a whole lot of risks. They never bottom out really, but they haven't been able to get to here. And maybe there's a safety net in just staying in there, and Jerry makes $1 gazillion and being relevant all the time. But like, Philly has an ability to find ways to try things that are outside the box, and there's no fear of trying them. And I think that's what makes them different than a lot of teams in this league.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's almost like once you get good enough, Howie has the luxury of knowing that Jeffrey has his back, and so he has the freedom to make those mistakes, right? It's like once you just sort of cross that threshold, then you get that freedom. The other thing I want to ask you about with Howie is something that we have talked about on the show, is just like from a national reporter perspective, there is the information marketplace in the league, right? GMs and reporters talking to each other, sharing information. And Howie has been at this so long. It is a great strength of his. Can you talk to that at all about like how important that is to him? Because he says the thing that keeps him up at night is like the idea that he might not know that someone is available, right? Like that he might miss something. So how important is that to his success, do you think?
I think it's everything. I think it's part of their draft process too. What's like a little bit of an offshoot of that is like one of the things, and this came back to me talking about them with you bringing that up, Bo, is like they never write players off. Like they in the draft process, they never do that, and that happens in a lot of buildings. Like the initial couple reports come in, and it's like, nah, this guy isn't for us. They circle back all the time and go, let's double check and make sure maybe he is for us. Maybe this scouting report is a little bit different than a couple of the other ones that come in, and Howie always circles back to make sure. And it's in the same vein of being like, I don't want to make sure that I don't miss that this guy's available. I don't want to eliminate a lot of guys off my board too early. I want to make sure that they're all available. So they circle back a lot, and he circles back a lot in the national landscape of players being available. I don't think anybody calls more probably than Howie Roseman. I don't know how you guys do it actually in the market. I want to ask you, because like, it's got to be, do you report every time like Howie Roseman called about so-and-so? Because like he calls about everybody. Like it's kind of do you report all that?
That's kind of a big joke we have is that like the easiest headline leading into the draft is that Howie's looking to move up, because all Howie does is move up. Like if you say breaking news, Howie's just going to stay where he is, he's not trying to trade, like that would be the headline more so than Howie's working the phones.
Well, it's like this year they end up staying at the pick, but like obviously he had called like every pick to see what it would take and talk to the teams behind. Like, of course, he wants to know what the cost is going to be in every situation.
Yeah, and I do know, talking to other teams, like he is a master poker player in, like, I know Atlanta thought a little bit that they were interested in Bijan. And I think everybody in Philly was probably like, I mean, like Howard bet his life on it or something, right? Like, I think everybody in Philly is kind of like, he doesn't do that. But like, he somehow made Atlanta believe that he was interested in Bijan. Like, he plays the game really, really well. And I think if you work as hard as Howie does and make as many phone calls as he does, it's pretty easy to cover your tracks because you called on everybody. So like, how do you give a couple of breadcrumbs that you're headed in this direction when you called every team? So I think it's kind of the better way to work. It was like, I'm sitting here in Denver and we mentioned it, like, if John Elway showed up somewhere, it was like, well, John ain't going on the plane just to go on the plane.
Right.
Like, that is not John Elway. So you were like, we should read into this a little bit. Like, Howie's going to call everybody. Eagles are going to be everywhere. And I think that's probably, to blanket the league, the best way to go about it, because there are plenty of teams that think Howie's doing one thing and he ends up doing something else.
Go ahead.
Yeah, as a follow-up to that, the offseason that they had now, this is my first chance catching up with you about this, because I last saw you at the Combine, adding Saquon. Obviously, we expected them to kind of move off of Hassan Reddick or potentially do that, but then bringing in Bryce Huff, bringing back C.J. Gardner-Johnson, some of these other moves they made, acting early on the contract extensions. What jumped out to you about the offseason that they just had?
I think the Saquon deal, Zach, is number one to me, in all honesty, just because it was an outside-of-the-box thought for how Howie works. But really, if you know Howie, and I know you guys do, it's what does my coaching staff want? What does my OC want? And I'll try to get him that. To me, that was him really listening to Kellen and really understanding what Kellen wants and making that happen. And going maybe away from what some people believe are his tendencies, but listening to his offensive coordinator and going, well, he really thinks if we have this piece, we're a different offense and he can do all of the things, Kellen can do all the things that he wants to do with this group. I'm going to make that happen. To me, Howie listening to Kellen in that sense of what would make this offense work stood out big time. Some of the other ones were things at the combine you mentioned that I had kind of heard. I heard Huff was like pretty much, going to happen. Reddick, that type of situation with those guys. I mean, I know they looked around at a lot of other guys. I know it was close with Justin Simmons and CJ Gardner-Johnson like at the safety spot. I know age played a part in that decision. Because when you're trying to change your identity, and nothing against Justin, it's kind of like the Justin Simmons podcast, but like nothing against Justin. He's one of my favorite people in the league and one of the best human beings on the planet. And still, I think a great safety. You don't tell everybody you want to get younger and faster as a defense, and then one of the first moves you make is a 30-year-old safety. Like that just kind of goes against what you're trying to put out there. I think that did really play a part in kind of the decision between the two. But Saquon was the one that really jumped out at me because of everything that went with that move.
That is also interesting, the Justin Simmons angle, to keep the Justin Simmons things going. Just from the
stir it up.
You would think that if Vic had like pounded the table and been like, this is the guy that I want to lead my defense, that Howie would have followed suit, right? So it's interesting that Vic was at least open to.
I know there was a lot, and I know that kind of happened, but there was a lot of different things that went into play on how you were picking some of these pieces. And at that time, now this part, I don't even know. Like, I mean, how different was the money? How different was every aspect that you're looking to do? You know what I mean? So there are a variety of I guess, boxes that were being checked on both sides between everybody.
I'm a little just blown away by like the professionalism from James. I mean, the backdrop is so fantastic.
Yeah.
We talked about the painting, the audio quality, the shot. What a pro.
Yeah.
Guys, how many people come on here like full IFB? Like,
I
thrown in.
It. Full
no AirPods.
And the pinned mic. I mean, you got it all going on.
Guys, come on. This is a professional setup here. I'm not going to sit here and willy-nilly this thing in with you guys. This is a big deal for me.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Are we still hitting on the Eagles?
You want to talk Philly? Go ahead.
Or can we talk Philly? Okay.
Let's go.
Anything else on the Eagles? Because I love talking Philly with people.
Well, anything? I think the one thing on the team that I'm really most fascinated about is we kind of touched on Cooper, but like how the competition at corner really plays out. And I think that they're waiting for camp, to my understanding, to see these things play out. And it could be a variety of things of who loses out on the second corner spot might be who plays nickel. Honestly, like it could be that, and somebody else. There's the competition, and then somebody else shines in nickel. Somebody else plays safe. Bradberry's been back there at safety for a long time, which is kind of funny, but just nobody in the media has seen it just because for one reason or another, he wasn't, at practice for what'd you guys get? 3 OTAs?
We got 2 OTAs and then 3 days of mandatory minicamp. Yeah.
Yeah. And then he gets the groin injury, right? And he can't participate in minicamp. So like it was established pretty early, like, that he was going to go back there. Just no media had seen it and nobody really knew about it, which is kind of funny.
That's a good nugget.
Yeah. And so, him back there and Avante maybe playing some safety and then moving these different guys around. I think the back end and how it shakes out is going to be my favorite part of training camp. And hopefully I can get there for some days to kind of see how it all goes.
Well, and it's interesting also because somebody sort of touched on this in the chat. I don't think that this is necessarily intentional from Howie, but for so long, the defense has been built front to back. And right now, the structure of it, just where the investments are, I mean, they've still got Jalen Carter. They still paid Josh Huff Bryce Huff a lot of money. They've still got Josh Sweat, Jordan Davis, first-round picks. But talent-wise, it feels like at least the focus is right now back to front as opposed to the traditional Howie structure.
Exactly. And I think those guys up front, I mean, like there's a lot on them, like a lot. They're not as deep as they've been in years past. I think there's a lot on that group up front that needs to perform.
So when we've had people like, whether it's Colleen Wolfe, Andy McCall, different guests who grew up here and then go elsewhere, the thing I'm fascinated about, and you grew up steeped in kind of the Philly media culture as well, is what's different as a sports consumer, as just a person, when you're used to the way it is here, and then you go to Houston and you go to Denver. Like is it as pronounced as it seems, or am I making too much of it? Like, are we in Philly that much different?
Oh yeah, it's different. It is definitely different. My comps to some extent would be Chicago and Boston, in terms of just the 24-hour local sports talk. Like, nobody in Philly's listening to a schlub like me, like a national like show in their car. Like they're not. They're listening to what happens in Philly. Like that's the way all of Philadelphia works. Like I truly believe two of my best buddies that are cops in Philly could be on WIP. Like that, like from our conversations, I'm like, this is all you guys think about. You sit in your cruiser all day and you just, you want to, and you listen to sports talk radio and you listen to everything that's getting put out there. There's a different, I think, fandom. I think there's a different education to the fan. There's a different, I don't want to say criticalness, but there's I expect this from you as a player in our city to do this. And if you do it, like you will be rewarded. I think it was while I was like pulling my hair out and dying with the Sixers in the postseason, which was just a terrible, terrible run, in my opinion, and just a frustrating team to watch. Like JJ Redick said, I think on one of the broadcasts, he's like, there's no better place to play and he played a lot of places. Like, he's like, there's no better place I've ever played. There's also like no worse place I've ever played. I mean, like, and it's kind of true, but like he did say, like, if you do things the right way, you're rewarded. And I think it's because the fans are somewhat, I mean, they probably drive you guys nuts sometimes, but like they're educated. They know more, I think, than some of these fans, and not to down the rest of the country, but there's a different commitment, I want to say, time commitment from the fan in Philly.
So is the rest of the house joining you in the Philly fandom, or is it Denver?
So we had to make decisions like on this. So like my wife is from California and Denver, like back and forth.
Okay.
So her dad was a huge Broncos fan, so she's Broncos. And then she told our son, like, you can be everything else dad does, but football, you're with the Broncos.
Oh, that seems
so like
fair.
I got Ohio State. And I got the Phillies, and I got, like, we went to the series here in Denver, went to 2 of the 3 games. We go to the 2 games they lost. Bryce Harper gets thrown out in the first, and my son's like devastated. Like, he's like crushed. We're sitting there in the stands. He's like, well, this is my favorite player. I get to see him once a year. This stinks. And so he's Philly on everything, but she told him, like, this is my one team, Broncos. We're going Broncos. But like, I think the last few years, he's probably like eyeing the Eagles like quite a bit with what's going on in Denver and the shuffling going on in this city.
What was 13-year-old James Palmer like as a Philly sports fan?
I was a loon for the Phillies. Number one. I loved basketball. Great. I mean, Philadelphia is such a great basketball town. I got my ass kicked by like ridiculous players in high school. Like really, really good players. Like my first start in high school at Upper Merion, my sophomore year was against Matt Carroll. And I thought I did a good job. And then he dropped like 32. I think he missed like 2 shots.
Habro Horseman.
Habro Horseman. That's Colleen Wolfe. I did not get a hand in his face. Like 6 foot, 150 pound James Palmer did not get a hand in Matt Carroll's face. But like, all the, like, Jameer Nelson, all those guys, like, they destroyed me in high school. But like, I even younger than 13, Zach, like I would wear my full hockey like pads to a Flyers game at like 9 years old. Like, what kid walks in with like a helmet, a Flyers, a Dave Poulin jersey, and like their gloves and like their elbow pads? Like that. Like I thought they're like, we need him, on the 4th line. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't gonna play, but I would come in all of my pads.
Well, but you definitely weren't going to play if you weren't suited up. I mean,
yeah, exactly. They weren't even going to look at me if I didn't have the gear on. So I was always kind of like, hey, this guy's over here. He's got a CCM gloves on. He's ready to roll. But it was like Philly sports everything. It was going to St. Joe's basketball camp, John Chaney basketball camp. Like hoops was a big deal for me at like that age. Then I realized, after getting waxed in high school all the time, like it was the end of it. But hoops and baseball were the 2 that I really, really like, was everything to me. And that's why like the Vet and getting a chance to play at the Vet as a high school kid was like the coolest thing in the world, just because I worshiped that place. So yeah, it was basketball and baseball were like the top for me, like everything. I thought Von Hayes was a god. Him and Darren Dalton just.
And so when work brings you back to Philly, what are the spots you need to hit?
Well, my parents live like out in Wayne, King of Prussia area, so I gotta I don't go to the mall, but I gotta go out and see the parents, and then I'll see a lot of my buddies that live in like, the Conchie area and stuff, and I got one of my best friends that I played all 3 sports with actually coming out here with him and his family next week. So like I stay like at the Notary, like right downtown by City Hall, and try to like hit up a bunch of different like local spots that I love, like little hole in the wall joints. And usually it's with like it's the buddies' wives that don't mind. Like it's the same 3 that I know I can call every time. Then I'm like, hey, I'm in town. We're going out. And like the other ones are like, nah, man, I got like 4 kids. It ain't happening. Like, and that call just doesn't happen anymore. I know my crew from home growing up with that can roll with me each night I'm back home.
All right.
The comment in the chat right now is this guy gets it. So yeah.
All right,
You're speaking to your people right now. We appreciate
these are my. Hey, listen, these are my people. These are my best friends. This is everybody. You know how many like group chats I am on about the Phillies, like that I don't see every game, but I'm like I know everything that's happening from like 4 different group chats about everything that's happening with Realmuto and everything that's happening. I mean, a lot of love for Stubbs, guys. A lot of love for Stubby coming in there. From all of my boys.
There's a bit of a risk of overexposure now over the next month, but
I think there is.
We'll see how that goes.
I think there is. I don't know. JT's been getting beat up lately, though. Like he needs I mean, I know the knee aside, but man, he's been taking some shots lately. He needs a little break.
Well, James, thank you so much for the insight. We'll let you get going to Broncos minicamp, but we really appreciate all the insight.
Guys, I'm going to tell you, like, just talking the players we just talked about, and we didn't even talk about, like, A.J. Brown and Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith and Lane Johnson and Jordan Mailata and all of these, like, there is a talent drop-off to the practice I'm about to go attend. I'm serious. Like, this is what do you before I go, real quick, like, where do you guys put this roster talent-wise in the league? Like, it's top 3.
I would say top 5 for sure. But I think that's.
I think there are more questions on the lines of scrimmage than they've had in the past. If they are what they think they can be on the defensive line, and if at center and right guard they're where they want to be, then I think they can be really good. But usually you say, all right, they're set on the lines. Let's see how they are on the back end. Or let's see how they are at some of these other spots. They have more questions on the lines of scrimmage than they've had in the past.
And I would just say, like, it was still a top 5 roster in December and January, and it didn't necessarily work out well. So they still have some work to do in terms of proving it.
Yeah, it didn't go great down the stretch. I think I was at that last one against the Giants. Yeah, I think I was with you guys, right? I think week 18.
Yes, yeah, that was another
New York.
Yep.
Yeah, that was yikes. That was brutal. All right, guys, this was a blast. This was wonderful.
So much.
You have an open invitation.
I don't like the Penn State. I don't like the Penn State pennant back there, being a Buckeye. But I'll let it.
You know what? A little inside baseball. We'd like to get that one replaced as well. But that's okay.
Not my
what would you put up?
A Penn Stater, but
some
other people.
What would you put up in place?
Well, we had a Brian Dawkins one there before. But I mean, there's some love for Temple. People want Temple there. We don't have to curry favor, but just a picture of Zach's face is what I would like.
Or a Palestra just to please everybody.
Oh, that's perfect. That's what I would want. The Palestra.
That's what I would do. Yeah. All right, boys.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take her easy.
Thank you.
Hopefully we'll talk to you again soon.
We all silly like the mayor.